Good afternoon. My name is Prentice Burke, and I'm a student here at Liberty University. I'm doing a PowerPoint presentation on interpersonal communication. Next slide. During this presentation, we'll be discussing communication, how to enlarge our conversations, six qualities of communication types, my personal background, my personal behavior blends, noise pollution, my barriers to communication, my overarching goals, my plan of action, and the summary. And this whole presentation will be based on the books Bridges, Not Walls, How to Solve the People Puzzle, Listening, the Forgotten Skill, and Why Don't We Listen Better? Next slide. What is communication? Communication is the continuous, complex, collaborative process of verbal and nonverbal meaning making. Peterson describes communication on two levels, that is, sharing information and connecting with others. And the goal of communication is to dialogue in a way that when one person is speaking, the other is listening. The listener replies in a manner that acknowledges the conversation and takes it a step further. Next slide. Now, what is interpersonal communication? According to Stewart in his 2012 edition, it states that this is the type or kind of communication that happens when the people involved talk and listen in ways that maximize the presence of the personnel. Communication is not only concerned with what is being said, but it's also concerning the way something is being said. Peterson's description of communication, it embraces the heart of interpersonal communication, which involves the sender who sends the message, and then you have the receiver who gives the feedback of the message. Next slide. Now, there's two aspects of communication, and Stewart explained this process as a breathing process, which we do on a daily basis, and it states that it can help us grasp a better understanding of the communication process. And during the inhaling, we can receive the message communicated by the sender, and then we can exhale by sending our message to the person that is talking. And the goal of effective communication is to progress a relationship to a high level of trust and freedom. In order to do this, we must focus on the inhaling process of communication as opposed to the exhaling process. Next slide. Now, in conversations, we have to learn how to enlarge our conversation, take it to another level. And just by mastering the basics of a conversation, that's just not enough. We have to move beyond the basics and learn to enlarge our conversation. And by enlarging our conversation, we can maximize the fulfillment through our talking and listening. It is understanding the role and responsibilities of each party involved, so that way everybody feels acknowledged, heard, considered, respected, and cared for. Each person that's involved in the conversation can walk away feeling empowered. Next slide. Now, there are 6 qualities of all communication types, which is meaning. That's the process of collaboratively making meaning of the conversation. Then you have a choice. The choice is where we consider or follow the conversation. Now, culture can be affected by the communication or be affected communication. And this can happen through ethnicity, gender, age, social class, sexual behavior, and other cultural aspects. Then we have identities, which involves negotiating identities or ourselves. Then we have the conversation, which is talking, and it is the most influential. Now, lastly, we have nexting. This part here is the most important part to me because we respond fruitfully to what has happened, what has been said, and we do it in a helpful manner. Next slide. Now, a little bit about my personal background. I'm a 46-year-old single divorced mother of 4. I have 3 girls, the ages of 26, 25, and 20. I have 1 son, the age of 23. I have 3 beautiful granddaughters, as you can see. Two of them are twins, Layla and Raina. Then we have Miss Desiree, whom is the oldest. She's 2, and she lives with me. I'm the third oldest of 9 children, 8 of us living. My parents are deceased. And my goal throughout this whole learning process, I want to become a Christian counselor with the education and the knowledge of being able to respond to crisis response and trauma. Next slide. Now, in doing my assessment of Uniquely You, I found that my behavior blends is DCIS. And these acronyms mean D, being active, task-oriented. Now, this behavior states that I can be domineering, directing, demanding, determined, decisive, and doing. Now, C, it says that this is the passive, task-oriented behavior. And it states that I can be cautious, competent, calculated, compliant, careful, and contemplative. Now, I is the active, people-oriented, and it states that I can be an inspiring, influencing, inducing, impressing, interactive, and interested in people. Now, lastly, not least, which is S, and this is my passive, people-oriented behavior. And it states that I can be steady, stable, shy, security-oriented, I can be a servant, I can be submissive, and I can be a specialist. And this is all true. Next slide. Now, in studying and reviewing my behavior blend, it has 2 graphs that explains who I am. The first graph states what people expect of me. The second graph is who am I? This is me, the real me. Now, in graph 1, it explains the SI blend, which it states that I'm people-oriented, I enjoy talking, I focus more on people's feelings, and I can be an encourager. Now, in graph 2, which is the CIS blend, now it states that I'm more passive than active, I'm outgoing and reserved, I like peace and harmony, and I'm flexible. I think graph 2 is more me than anything. But in knowing all these behavior blends, it allows me to understand how others view me, what they expect of me, and which in return can allow me to be a more enriched conversationalist and to be able to listen more when I'm speaking to others. Next slide. Now, one of the things that's a problem during communication is noise pollution. This can be anything that's unwanted, any human created sound that has the ability to affect you in being distractive, painful, physically harmful, just being annoying. And in the process of that, you have 2 types of noise pollution, which is the internal, which could be our thoughts, our judgments, or even our own opinions we keep to ourselves. And then you have the external noise pollution, which include noises such as conversations or other noises that surround you. But in learning to alleviate or overrule the noise pollutions in our lives is a skill that needs to be accomplished in order to become a more effective listener. Next slide. Now, in learning my behavior blends and what affects me, as far as noise and hinder my communication process with others, it can be my emotions, my lack of interest, my readiness to just solve issues without completely listening to someone, formulate my thoughts and responses in advance. I need to learn how to maintain my personal biases and stereotypes with certain people. And when I can do this, I can learn to eliminate my noise pollution, and it won't hinder my focus. So, next slide. Now, I found that my solution to my noise pollution is to place the talker's need before my own, take a moment, clear my mind and focus, stay in close proximity, silence my cell phone, turn the television off. As I state, create an environment to hear from God. Move the conversation to a more safe, sharing environment where you can have more effective listening. Next slide. Now, my barriers to communication, which are physical barriers, biased listening, semantic barriers, and in these barriers, the physical one is tinnitus. This is where I have a constant ringing in my ears. Then we got the perception, reception, and attention, where we just already got our perception of someone. Then we receptive. We're not really receptive of what's going on, and our attention span during the process. And then the semantic barrier, learning and applying meanings are not just in the words. The meaning are in the people. And being aware of my hot buttons. These are the things that increase my defense mechanism when I'm speaking with someone or someone wants to have a conversation with me. And not being so quick to interrupt. And when I can break through all these barriers, I can be a more effective listener. Next slide. Now, my overarching goals, which is the OAG, and in these, it states that the goal of this is to embrace and cultivate a set of related goals, and my goal is to become a more empathetic listener or a level 1 listener. And according to Burley Allen, his 95 edition, it states that a level 1 listener is one who listens empathetically, does not allow personal outside distractions, give attention solely to the talker. Verbal and nonverbal mannerisms that demonstrate listening. Try not to be assuming of others just because they come and listen to you or they want to discuss their issues with you, that you are a good listener, because sometimes we may not be. And when we have a better understanding of our goals and how to be a good listener, we can understand our communication style, we can advance our listening skills, we can understand the different levels of communication, and we can minimize our noise pollution. Next slide. Now, I plan to use the plan of action according to Burley Allen, which states that I should hold my rebuttal. Watch out for hot buttons. Don't let emotion-laden words throw me. Don't let words filled with emotion throw me. Being aware of my nonverbal messages that I send or I receive from others. Being critical of just the content, not the delivery of the content, and understanding how to apply the talk listener card, and being mindful of my role as a listener. Next slide. My plan of action for my career: I want to be a life coach and a Christian counselor, like I said, with the knowledge and the understanding of how to deal with crisis responses and trauma. I want to be grounded in my communication. I like to advance my listening skills. I want to be able to always put my own thoughts aside and feelings so I can be able to acknowledge others. And doing so, I can acknowledge that listening allows me as a speaker to be able to truly and fully hear others, what they have going on in their head and in their heart. Next slide. And in summary of all of this, I have learned how I can communicate, where I need to make improvements in my communications, how I can improve my relationships and make them much better. And reading these two scriptures helped me a lot. Proverbs 15:1 states, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but grievous words stirs up anger." And in Colossians 4:6 it states, "Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that ye may know how ye ought to answer every man." This is the end of my presentation. I pray that all that is listening and watching is blessed.